I'ma do you like baby them did me. Yeah. I'll never forget that day. Yeah, no, they was all in the kitchen. I was scared. It was cool. There was about this many niggas too in that bitch. I never forget the word. Suckle up Wayne let.
That's Wayne, in his own words, telling a 15-year-old Lil Twist what went down when he was just 11. But that kitchen incident, that's only the beginning of what Birdman allegedly put him through. The come-up that came with a cost. Yo, what's good, fam? Look, we gotta have a real conversation today about one of the most disturbing dynamics in hip-hop history. We talking about Weezy F Baby, the greatest rapper alive according to himself, and millions of fans worldwide. But before he was dropping classics like Thought Carter 3, before he was kissing Grammy trophies and selling out arenas across the globe, young Dwayne Michael Carter Jr. was just a kid from Holly Grove, New Orleans, navigating a world of violence, poverty, and predators wearing expensive suits and flashing record deals. The story begins around 1991-1993 when Birdman met Wayne through his brother Slim. Picture this scene real clear in your mind. Wayne was just 8 or 9 years old at the time. His biological father had already bounced on the family, leaving the youngin' without that paternal guidance every kid needs to navigate this cold world. Wayne's mother, Jacida Carter, was doing her absolute best to raise him amid the chaos of New Orleans streets, a city known for its music, its culture, but also its violence and its poverty. Then here comes Brian Birdman Williams, co-founder of Cash Money Records, stepping into this young boy's life like some kind of savior figure. But the question that's haunted this story for decades remains: was he really saving Wayne, or was he setting up something far more sinister from the very beginning? You gotta understand the context of New Orleans in the early 90s. The murder rate was through the roof. Crack had devastated communities. Young black boys were getting killed or locked up at alarming rates. So when a successful businessman with jewelry dripping off his neck and luxury cars in his driveway shows interest in your talented son, what mother wouldn't see that as an opportunity for escape? Jacida Carter saw Birdman as a path out of poverty for her gifted child. She couldn't have known, or maybe she couldn't have imagined, what that path would actually entail. Birdman signed Wayne to Cash Money in 1993 when the kid was just 11 years old, forming the Hot Boys with Juvenile, BG, and Turk. Think about that for a second and let it really register. 11 years old. That's 5th grade, fam. That's still believing in Santa Claus for some kids. While other children his age were worried about homework, recess, and who was gonna pick them first for kickball, Wayne was being molded into a rap prodigy by grown men in the music industry. Men who had their own agendas. Men who saw dollar signs when they looked at this talented little boy from the projects. Birdman claimed he adopted Wayne in 1995, though no official records have ever surfaced to verify this adoption actually took place. Think about how significant that claim is. Birdman went around telling the world he legally adopted this child, cementing himself as Wayne's father in the public eye, yet when people went looking for the receipts, there weren't any. No court documents, no legal paperwork, just Birdman's word, and a narrative that served his purposes perfectly. Father-son story was being pushed hard from day one, and it created a dynamic that made questioning their relationship seem like questioning a family bond. The dynamic they built was intense on every level. Birdman housed Wayne, bought him cars, showered him with material possessions, and consistently called him son in every interview and public appearance. Wayne reciprocated that energy completely, going so far as to tattoo BM Jr. on his chest. Birdman Jr. Let that sink in. The child permanently marked his body with a tribute to this man. He even dropped Carter Jr. from his professional name because, in his mind, his biological father meant nothing to him. In a 2011 GQ interview, Wayne made his feelings crystal clear about his real dad, stating the man didn't care about him, and the feeling was absolutely mutual. Wayne had completely transferred his paternal attachment to Birdman. But here's where the psychology gets complicated, and where critics and observers have long raised red flags. This bond that looked like love, that looked like mentorship, that looked like a beautiful story of a successful man giving a fatherless child a chance, many have interpreted it as textbook grooming behavior. Birdman allegedly exploited Wayne's vulnerability, his desperate need for a father figure, his desire to belong to something bigger than himself. He gave Wayne everything a child could want materially, while allegedly taking things that can never be returned. Now let's address the elephant in the room that everybody been talking about for literal decades: the kisses. This ain't rumor or speculation. Multiple instances have been documented throughout the years and captured on camera for the world to see. The 2002 Rap City kiss that had viewers doing double takes, the 2006 magazine photo that leaked and broke the internet before breaking the internet was even a phrase people used, and the 2009 BET Awards moment that sparked a whole new round of conversations. These weren't quick pecks on the cheek like you might give your grandma neither. We talking about mouth-to-mouth contact between a grown one man and his young protege that made everybody deeply uncomfortable. Birdman himself addressed this controversy directly when the heat got too intense to ignore. Listen to what he said when asked to explain himself.
First of all, my unborn son, I kiss him. I always looked at Wayne as my son. I always looked at it like, cause I was in the streets. I thought this might be the last time he ever see me, cause...
Now that explanation might sound reasonable on the surface if you don't think about it too hard. A father figure showing affection, because street life is dangerous and tomorrow ain't promised to nobody out here. That's a sentiment a lot of people in the hood can relate to. The context matters more than words, and the context here is deeply troubling when you factor in everything else that was allegedly happening behind closed doors at Cash Money. When you look at the full picture, that explanation starts to look less like justification and more like deflection. Young Buck, formerly of G-Unit and 50 Cent's crew, witnessed this dynamic firsthand during his time around Cash Money. When asked about it directly in a Vlad TV interview, he didn't dodge the question. He confirmed seeing it happen with his own eyes.
But he said, yeah, I mean, that was actually happening. Did you ever see that?
Yeah. I mean, Baby never played with me like that. Don't let me clear that up. You understand what I'm saying? I never seen Baby play with Juvenile like that.
Keep what Young Buck said there real carefully because the implications are massive. Baby never played with him like that. He never saw Baby play with Juvenile like that neither. So this wasn't some Cash Money-wide tradition of showing fatherly love to all the artists on the roster. This wasn't just how Birdman expressed affection to everyone in his circle. This was specific. This was targeted. This was Wayne, and seemingly Wayne alone among the major artists. That specificity is what transforms this from weird cultural thing to something far more concerning. And rapper 40 Glock took it even further when he described what he personally witnessed, and his account is graphic in its detail.
Kissing, I watched him kiss Lil Wayne in his mouth. I said in his mouth. I said, man, like he be lying. He like, I swear to God. He said, I said, what you mean? Like he smooched him on his cheek or something? Like, no, they tongue kissed.
Tongue kissed. Let that register. Not a peck on the cheek like you'd give a family member. Not a fatherly smooch on the forehead. According to 40 Glock's eyewitness account, he talking about something far more intimate than any father-son relationship should ever involve under any circumstances. Hot Boys Tech 9 also witnessed kisses with both BG and Wayne when they were teenagers, and he went on record calling it weird. Multiple witnesses, multiple occasions, multiple artists affected. Wayne himself addressed the controversy in his music over the years, rapping, "I kissed my daddy" on the We Taken Over remix like it was something to defend rather than question. But was that Wayne reclaiming his narrative on his own terms? Or was it a traumatized young man normalizing something that should never have been normalized in the first place? Was he defending Birdman or defending himself from the shame of what had happened to him? The street's been debating this for years, and the answer ain't as simple as some folks want it to be when it comes to trauma and how victims process their experiences. The trauma that shaped a legend. Aight fam, now we gotta go deeper into this rabbit hole because the kisses, as disturbing and uncomfortable as they were to witness, might have just been the tip of a much larger and darker iceberg. What Wayne himself has described from his childhood at Cash Money is the kind of stuff that would make anybody's stomach turn and question everything they thought they knew about this industry. In the Carter documentary from 2009, Wayne sat down with a young Lil Twist, who was about 15 at the time, and told him directly about an incident that happened when Wayne was just 11 years old. The documentary, cameras were rolling. This wasn't some off-the-record confession or leaked private conversation. Wayne chose to share this story publicly, almost like he needed the world to know what had happened to him, even if he was framing it as something else. This is Wayne, in his own words, on camera, describing what went down in that kitchen.
I'ma do you like Baby them did me. Yeah. I'll never forget that day. Yeah, no, they was all in the kitchen. I was scared. It was cool. There was about this many too in that bit. I never forget the word. Suckler Wayne
Let that sink in for a moment. Really process what you just heard. Baby them did me. Wayne explicitly referenced Birdman and others as part of the group that was present during this incident. He said he was scared. He was 11 years old, still a child by any definition. According to multiple reports and Wayne's own subsequent discussions, Birdman and Slim allegedly arranged for a 14-year-old girl to perform a sexual act on 11-year-old Wayne in a kitchen, while multiple adults stood around and watched it happen. This wasn't some private moment between two kids. This was orchestrated by adults. It was was witnessed by adults. It was apparently considered some kind of initiation into the Cash Money family, a rite of passage that involved the exploitation of children. The fact that Wayne was telling this story to Lil Twist, another young artist under his wing, adds another disturbing layer. "I'ma do you like baby them did me?" sounds almost like a warning or a threat depending on how you interpret it. Was Wayne perpetuating a cycle he himself had been subjected to? Was he trying to prepare Twist for what might be coming? Or was he processing his own trauma by talking about it, even in this twisted way? The psychology of abuse is complicated, and victims often struggle to identify their experiences as abuse, especially when those experiences happened during childhood and were normalized by the adults around them. Wayne later referred to this incident as in subsequent discussions and interviews, though he also laughed it off at times, saying he loved it back then. But here's what's crucial to understand about trauma and how it manifests in survivors. Trauma responses are complicated as hell. Victims often minimize their experiences as a coping mechanism. They joke about things that hurt them deeply because humor creates distance from pain. This is especially true when the trauma happened during childhood, and especially when the perpetrators are people they've been conditioned to love, trust, and depend on for their entire livelihood and identity. Wayne joking about this incident doesn't mean it didn't damage him profoundly. In fact, the nervous laughter, the casual retelling, the way he frames it as something that was simultaneously scary and cool, these are all classic signs of unprocessed trauma. The way he casually told Lil Twist he was gonna "do you like baby them did me" suggests a normalization of predatory behavior that gets passed down from one generation of artists to the next, like some kind of twisted inheritance. The impact on Wayne's life has been profound, documented, and tragically predictable for anyone who understands childhood trauma. In a 2021 podcast appearance, Wayne connected his childhood trauma directly to PTSD and revealed something that shook the hip-hop world. He attempted to end his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound at just 12 years old, exactly 1 year after that kitchen incident allegedly occurred. Think about that timeline with full clarity. At 11, Wayne allegedly experiences this traumatic initiation, surrounded by adults who should have protected him. At 12, he tries to take his own life. That ain't coincidence, fam. That's cause and effect written in the most tragic terms possible. A child doesn't try to end his life for no reason. A child who has access to material wealth, who's being groomed for stardom, who has a father figure who claims to love him, that child doesn't pick up a weapon and turn it on himself unless something is deeply, fundamentally wrong in his world. Wayne survived that attempt, but how many others in similar situations didn't? How many young artists have we lost to suicide, overdose, or violence who never got the chance to tell their stories? Wayne's well-documented struggles with addiction, particularly his severe codeine dependency that started around age 12, have also been linked by observers and Wayne himself to these early traumatic experiences. Self-medication is one of the most common responses to unprocessed trauma. When you can't escape the pain mentally, you try to escape it chemically. Wayne's lean addiction nearly killed him multiple times over the years, leading to seizures and hospitalizations that made headlines. When you look at the pattern, the early signing to a label run by adult men, the inappropriate physical affection that multiple witnesses observed, the alleged orchestrated sexual encounters involving minors, the subsequent mental health struggles, the suicide attempt, the substance dependency, it paints a picture of systematic exploitation that left deep, permanent scars on one of hip-hop's brightest talents. And Wayne wasn't allegedly the only victim of this environment. Similar accusations have surfaced over the years involving other young artists connected to Cash Money, including disturbing claims about Lil Chucky allegedly being mistreated at 12, 13 years old, and a separate 1990s allegation involving Birdman and another 14-year-old. The pattern that emerges when you zoom out and look at the full picture is one of young, vulnerable boys from difficult socio-economic backgrounds being brought into an environment where normal boundaries didn't exist, and exploitation was allegedly normalized under the guise of mentorship, family, and opportunity. Some industry observers and cultural commentators have drawn uncomfortable parallels to other well-documented cases. There seems to be a disturbing pattern in certain corners of the entertainment industry where the sexual exploitation of minors gets repackaged as mentorship, as toughening kids up, as preparing them for the real world. It's abuse dressed up in different clothes. In Wayne's memoir, Gone Till November from 2016, which documented his experiences during his year-long prison stint, he notably and deliberately distanced himself from Birdman, stating plainly and coldly that Birdman's last name isn't Carter, and therefore he's not family. That single statement is incredibly significant, coming from someone who spent most of his life calling this man Daddy, who tattooed tributes on his body, who defended their relationship publicly for years, who kissed this man on camera and then defended that too. The man who raised him, who he stood by through every controversy, who he credited for everything he had, suddenly wasn't family anymore. The memoir doesn't directly address the abuse allegations in explicit terms, but the fundamental shift in how Wayne characterizes their relationship speaks volumes about what changed in his understanding of what he had experienced. The psychological complexity here can't be overstated or simplified. Wayne spent his entire formative years in an environment where abnormal was normalized, where exploitation was called love, where boundaries were something that happened to other people. He was showered with money, cars, jewelry, fame, and opportunity, all while allegedly being subjected to experiences that would traumatize any child. How do you reconcile the man who gave you everything you ever wanted materially also being the man who allegedly took something from you that can never be returned? How do you hate someone you've been conditioned to love? How do you acknowledge abuse when acknowledging it means your entire identity, your career, your success is built on a foundation of exploitation? Wayne's entire career has been colored by this duality, his lyrics often touching on themes of pain, isolation, numbness, and substance dependency that trace back to those formative years in ways that are impossible to ignore once you see them. The reckoning and the road forward. Now we gotta talk about how all of this finally came to a head publicly, because the relationship between Wayne and Birdman didn't just involve these disturbing personal dynamics and alleged childhood trauma, it also involved straight-up financial exploitation at a massive scale that eventually led to one of hip-hop's biggest and most publicized legal battles. In 2014, Wayne publicly declared himself a prisoner of Cash Money Records on social media, unable to release his highly anticipated album, The Carter 5, due to label interference and contractual disputes. Think about the irony and the tragedy in that statement. The man who had made Cash Money hundreds of millions of dollars, who had put that label on the map globally, who had discovered and developed superstars like Drake and Nicki Minaj, that man was being held hostage by the very empire he helped build with his talent and his trauma. Wayne took to Twitter, airing his grievances publicly for all to see, and making it crystal clear that the father-son facade had completely and irreparably crumbled. By 2015, Wayne escalated the conflict by filing a massive lawsuit seeking $51 million from Cash Money and Birdman personally. The allegations contained in that lawsuit were absolutely staggering in their scope and their implications. Wayne claimed that Birdman had systematically diverted profits from Young Money, the label Wayne founded that housed platinum-selling superstars like Drake and Nicki Minaj, to repay Cash Money's outstanding debts to other entities. Wayne owned 49% of Young Money, but according to the lawsuit's allegations, Cash Money had registered Young Money's copyrights and intellectual property solely under the Cash Money corporate umbrella, effectively cutting Wayne out of his own company's earnings despite his ownership stake. The lawsuit also accused Universal Music Group of colluding with Cash Money in this financial scheme, alleging that Universal paid a massive $100 million advance to Cash Money, but failed to properly account for how that money was distributed to Wayne as a significant stakeholder. The legal documents stated explicitly that Cash Money had failed to provide a single accounting statement to Wayne, despite Drake being one of the best-selling and most commercially successful artists in the entire music industry during that period. Let that sink in. Drake was generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue through album sales, streaming, touring, and merchandise. Wayne owned nearly half of the label operation that Drake was signed to, and Wayne wasn't seeing proper documentation of where any of that money was going. That's not bad accounting. That's alleged theft on a corporate scale. The beef between Wayne and Birdman escalated far beyond courtroom filings and legal proceedings. Wayne started dissing Birdman publicly in interviews and on tracks, calling him out of his name and explicitly referencing hard abuse in his bars. The word choice there is significant. Abuse, not disagreement, not business dispute. Abuse. In 2015, the conflict turned violent when drinks were thrown at Wayne during a live performance, and more seriously, his tour bus was shot up in Atlanta in what appeared to be an attempted assassination, an incident that led to criminal indictments with alleged links to both Birdman and Young Thug, though the attempted murder charges were eventually dropped. The streets and the industry were watching as what had been presented as the ultimate father-son relationship transformed into what looked like genuine warfare with potential lethal consequences. Adding salt to what was already a devastating wound, Birdman was actively and publicly pushing Young Thug as the new Wayne, a direct replacement for the artist who had sacrificed his childhood and made Cash Money what it was. The symbolism was brutal. After allegedly grooming Wayne from childhood, exploiting him financially for decades, and subjecting him to experiences that left lasting long-lasting trauma, Birdman was now attempting to simply replace him with a newer, younger model. It was the ultimate disposability, use and artist up during their most vulnerable and productive years, then discard them when they start asking questions about where the money went. Wayne stated publicly and repeatedly that he would never work with Birdman again under any circumstances. But Wayne wasn't the only artist with serious grievances against Cash Money's predatory business practices. Juvenile, Manny Fresh, Turk, and BG had all previously left the label over their own claims of unpaid royalties and financial exploitation. Juvenile went on the record in interviews saying point blank that Birdman robbed the Hot Boys of their earnings. In 2017, Jazz Prince and Aspire Music Group filed their own lawsuit against Cash Money, claiming they were contractually owed 1/3 of profits from their role in Drake's discovery and development. Even Pusha T, who had no direct business relationship with Cash Money, got in on the public criticism, dissing Birdman specifically in his 2018 track Infrared for his well-known pattern of exploiting artists. The picture emerging from multiple independent sources was one of systematic financial manipulation that directly mirrored the personal exploitation Wayne had allegedly experienced as a child. In 2018, after years of legal battles and public warfare, Wayne and Cash Money finally reached an out-of-court settlement. The specific terms weren't fully disclosed to the public, but reports from reliable industry sources indicated that Wayne was finally freed from his restrictive Cash Money contract, received an undisclosed sum rumored to be well over $10 million in back payments, and most importantly for his legacy and his finances, regained ownership of his masters, the actual recordings that represent his life's work. Birdman issued a public apology for how things had deteriorated, and the two eventually reunited on stage at a concert, seemingly putting the public beef behind them for the camera. Wayne finally released Val Carter V in September 2018 after years of delays and interference, and the album was described by music critics and cultural commentators as nothing less than a triumph over trauma, a creative statement from an artist who had survived childhood exploitation, crippling substance addiction, federal incarceration, devastating legal battles, and what appeared to be actual attempts on his life. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts, proving definitively that despite everything Wayne had endured, his extraordinary talent and his loyal fan base remained absolutely undeniable. In recent interviews from 2025, Wayne has reflected on the fallout with measured words, describing the entire experience as tough, but ultimately resolved. Birdman continues to call Wayne his son forever in public statements. But here's the thing that can't be ignored. Reconciliation doesn't mean erasure. Public handshakes don't erase private trauma. The incidents Wayne described on camera in his own words, the pattern of behavior witnessed by multiple independent observers, the financial exploitation documented extensively in court filings, none of that disappears just because they shook hands at a concert and performed together again for the audience. The conversation about Wayne and Birdman has resurfaced with new intensity and new context. Social media is filled with discussions comparing the two situations directly, with many users arguing passionately that what happened to Wayne was even more brazen and more disturbing because so much of it occurred in plain public sight. The kisses were broadcast on television for millions to see. The documentary footage where Wayne describes the kitchen incident exists and is readily accessible. Wayne told his story on camera, and we all watched it without fully processing what we were hearing. Yo fam, what makes this story so deeply painful is that Wayne is arguably the most talented and influential rapper of his entire generation. His wordplay is unmatched. His flow revolutionized the genre. His prolificacy, releasing quality music at a pace that put other artists to shame, became legendary. But at what cost did that legend emerge? How much of Wayne's artistic brilliance was forged in the fire of trauma that he never asked for and never deserved? How many of his most celebrated songs are actually expressions of pain that we mistook for mere braggadocio? And how many other young artists have experienced similar situations in this industry without ever finding the platform, the courage, or the opportunity to speak about it publicly? The music industry is at a crossroads right now, and it's a crossroads it should have reached decades ago. The walls are finally coming down. The secrets that everybody knew but nobody would say out loud are spilling out into the open. The powerful figures we celebrated for decades are being revealed in new and deeply troubling lights. Birdman built an empire on the backs of young artists from the impoverished neighborhoods of New Orleans, and the most successful of those artists has told us, in his own words, captured on camera for posterity, what that relationship actually entailed behind the scenes. So where do we go from here as an industry and as a culture? No criminal charges have ever been filed against Birdman related to these specific allegations. Wayne himself has seemingly made peace with the situation, at least in his public statements. But the documentation exists. The pattern is undeniable and clear. And as the music industry continues to reckon with its darkest chapters and most protected secrets, the story of Lil Wayne Wayne, and Birdman serves as a cautionary tale about what happens when vulnerable children are placed in the hands of powerful men who operate without accountability, oversight, or consequences. Wayne survived what many others might not have. He overcame obstacles that would have destroyed lesser individuals. He became one of the greatest to ever touch a microphone, influencing an entire generation of artists who came after him. But survival shouldn't be the standard we celebrate. Protection should be, and until the music industry fundamentally changes how it treats young artists, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds who are desperate for any opportunity to escape their circumstances, these stories will keep emerging. The names will change, the labels will change, but the pattern will remain the same until we demand something different. That's the real talk, fam. Sometimes the people who claim to love us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. Sometimes the hands that lift us up are the same hands that hold us down. And sometimes the only way to truly honor someone's story and their survival is to tell it completely. Even the parts that make us uncomfortable, even the parts that implicate people we admired, even the parts that force us to question everything we thought we knew. Stay tuned, stay woke, and most importantly, protect the kids. If you enjoyed this video, click on any of the cards on your screen.